Hi guys, happy Christmas. Steve sent in this awesome picture of this tiger. I don't know whether it's a tiger or a tigress, but yeah, oh, isn't this stunning? I absolutely love it. I wish it was mine. Taken early in the morning. I mean, Steve's got the capture time down here is 3:15 in the morning. Well, that's not right, but that's 3:15 GMT. This is over somewhere on the Indian subcontinent, so it's going to be 5.5 hours ahead of us. So we're probably looking somewhere around about 8 o'clock when he's taken this. 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning, and I just love it. It's in this sort of thickety woodland and all this beautiful mist, early morning mist hanging around, and shot on a 1DX Mark II with the 200-400 with the internal teleconverter in at 560mm, 1/800th of a second, f5.6, ISO 10,000. And if we go and have a look at the image, and yeah, let's go to, where's my F key gone? There we go, full screen. And this is the image as Lightroom wants to make what it will of it, and I've actually changed it a little bit. And if I go out to a fit to screen view, so here we are looking at it at full size, and you can see I've cropped it a little bit because we didn't need the extra bit of the tiger and the extra side of this tree over here. And I've tried to emphasize the things that I love about this image, which is the low contrast, the mystery, the mystique of, well, what surrounds tigers. I mean, they are just awesome things. And to see it in this early morning mist, and we tried to exaggerate the mist and make the most of the atmosphere of the shot. We don't really need to make a lot of the tiger because, well, it's a tiger. The fact that the tiger's in the image, you know, it calls enough attention to itself. We don't really need to emphasize that. So what I'm doing here is amplifying the atmosphere. Yeah, I could go into little details and take out these little glary speculas down here, which obviously are detractments. Detractments? Is that actually a word? But they are distractions, visual distractions. So anyway, now one question Steve did ask me was, in the light of the previous video that I put up about partial metering on Canon, would it make a great deal of difference? Well, I've actually got the raw file open in DPP, and here it is, and we'll take it up to 100% view so we can see Steve's got the main portion of the focusing group in pretty much the right place, and if we can see the histogram, and then we look over here at the exposure, you can see Steve's actually got +1 stop of EV compensation dialed in here, and it's still come up with a histogram that looks like this. So would partial metering have made a difference? Yeah, it would have made a difference. Yeah, I think it would have. I suspect it would have pushed the exposure probably a stop further to the right, but I don't know. I just suspect that it would have done, because you can see we've got the ISO speed of 10,000, and Steve's in manual exposure with, I would imagine, auto ISO. Does it say auto ISO? ISO speed? Yeah, auto ISO speed is on. So basically the cameras wanted to expose, or the camera's metering systems wanted to expose this at 5,000 ISO, given Steve's shutter speed and aperture choice, and then Steve's added another stop. Now you must remember that when you want to add exposure comp when you're in manual mode and auto ISO, all it's going to do is turn the ISO up 1 stop. So 5,000, up one stop, 10,000 ISO. Now, there's a little bit of a problem here. This is where shooting manual and auto ISO it has a little tiny bit of an Achilles heel when you get up into these higher ISO brackets, because in this situation there's not a lot of photons kicking about, not a lot of light kicking around at all. So seeing as exposure is all about sensor saturation, and that means saturation with light, not colour saturation, seeing as it's all about saturation, you need to be as far over to the right as possible, but you've got to take into account that when you're up at these big, high or super high ISOs, the camera's dynamic range is severely curtailed. Now, I've never measured the dynamic range of the Canon 1DX Mark II, but I strongly suspect it's somewhere akin to that of a Nikon D4, D4S. So, despite numbers published to the contrary, the usable dynamic range for a Nikon D4, D4S is around about 10.5 stops. But that's only 3 stops of that is in the highlight areas. It's all down from the 118 midtones down into the shadow areas. So it's a very, very lopsided dynamic range. And when we push up into these sort of crazy high ISOs, what we're doing is we're curtailing the dynamic range. So what we do is we lose dynamic range in both the shadows and the highlights. You must remember that. So on a 1DX Mark II, Nikon D4, etc., you've really got to be a little bit picky as to whether you would allow the camera to make a jump from 5,000 to 10,000 ISO, or you might be better leaving it at 5,000 ISO by taking the exposure compensation out and then just lifting the exposure by a stop inside of Lightroom or whatever, because you might just keep the dynamic range at 5,000 ISO, because the dynamic range at 5,000 ISO will be, might not be much, but it certainly will be wider or bigger or greater than the dynamic range at 10,000 ISO. So that's just, it's just worth taking on board for anybody who shoots in manual with auto ISO. You just need to watch those auto ISO values and see where they're going, because from a noise point of view, the noise won't be any worse if we'd shot this at 5,000 ISO and then lifted it to stop inside a Lightroom, because Canon 1DX is pretty much ISO invariant. So, you know, there's pros and cons and it swings and roundabouts, but just don't let your ISO go up super lunatic numbers. I mean, yeah, I did one at 16,000 ISO the other day, didn't I? But yeah, there was a lot more light kicking around in that shot, so I could get more saturation or light saturation of all the photosites on the sensor in that particular shutter interval than Steve's managed to get here, even though he's actually using a slower shutter speed. So yeah, there's not a lot of light about here. Partial metering might well have pushed the exposure a little bit more, and an 800th of a second at f5.6. I'll bet you partial metering would have given him that at f6.3, and the histogram would have been a little bit further to the right. I suspect that. I don't know it, but I suspect it. But anyway, let's forget about the technical side. So we will shut down DPP. Thank God for that. And we'll come back to the actual image itself. And yeah, you can see, as I said, I've cropped it, and I'm trying to emphasise the mood and the atmosphere, because I don't think the tiger needs any visual exaggeration or amplification. Try and keep the mystery. Right, so what we'll do with this is we will go over into the develop module, and we'll come back to a single image view, and we'll go reset. So here we are, and this is the image as Lightroom wants to render it. Now, it's got all the default sharpening on, it's got no masking on. I mean, it's just exactly the way Lightroom imports the image. And you can see we've got a little bit of excessive contrast here. These highlights are too bright, and we've got an awful lot of noise, especially in the darker areas of the image. So we're going to do a very, very quick, simple process on this. I'll go over and do my normal process version swap, and there we go. So now we can see we've got a lot more detail in those highlights than we had originally. So I'm going to come over to the basics panel, and I think I'm going to turn the exposure up just a little bit. We'll go minus 0.5. There we go. That's a little bit better. I'm going to add a little bit of contrast back to it. So we'll take it up to, instead of minus 33, we'll just pump a little bit more in, minus 25. I think before I do anything else, I'm going to come down to the details panel, and we'll leave the actual level of default sharpening as it is. But I think we'll hold down the Alt key, and we'll just hit the masking slider, and we'll click and drag, and I'll probably just leave it around about there. And it just takes a little bit of the sharpening off the noise, but we've also got to remove the noise, and we don't want all that much noise reduction on it, but that's not looking too bad. I might take it up to 8, and yes, I don't think that's looking too bad at all. What else could we do? We might go back to the basics panel, and I think we are going to actually turn up the highlights, and we'll turn the highlights up to around about there. It's just looking just that little bit. The whites, what I want to try and do is bring out the whites. We'll go back to a smaller, bit more compact view so we can see what we're doing. And I might actually lift up the whites as well. Yes, this is looking a bit nicer, because now we're just bringing out a little bit of this fog. Let's go back to a beginning view. So there's where we started. This is where we're at now, and you can see the noise levels in these darker out of focus areas have really been brought under control. And because we've put that sharpening masking on, where you can see fine detail, because don't forget at 10,000, 16,000 ISO, because we've clipped the dynamic range of the camera so much, we are just not going to see the same level of fine detail that we'd see at base ISO, or something more approximate to base ISO. So by jacking your ISO up, you increase noise, yes, you lose dynamic range, yes, and you do lose fine detail resolution. Right, so what else are we going to do? We will come back to a normal working view, and we've got the whites up. Are we going to do any clarity adjustments? I think we'll just turn the clarity up just a little bit, 10, 11, but we need to counter that with a little bit of dehaze. So I think we'll just bring that dehaze down, and that will emphasize the fog as well. I'm quite liking the look of that. Now, I still haven't finished processing it, but I've got to go and crop it now, because It's starting to drive me nuts. So I'm just going to drop it straight into a 16:9 crop, and then all this part of the image here is, to me, unnecessary. It's not really adding anything to the overall look and feel of the image. So I'm just going to crop it until I've cropped out the right hand side of this tree trunk here, and I'm going to go ahead and click done on there, and that I do like. Not finished yet. I think we're going to go into the HSL panel, I think, and I think we are going to actually crank up the saturation of the oranges. Yeah, in point of fact, what we'll do is we'll put that back and we'll go and get a micro adjuster, and I'm just going to come onto this sort of brighter orange part of the tiger's shoulder, and I think we might just lift that up and keep pushing up until we've actually increased the saturation, and then yeah, I think we'll go quite considerably more on that, and a little bit more on the old yellow as well, because you're always going to have to bring yellow up with orange, otherwise you won't get a smooth gradient. And you can see now we've sort of started to bring out the if I turn that off, you see when I turn it back on again, you'll notice these highlights on the side of these two small tree trunks, and it's not mesquite. I don't know what it will be out in India, but they look like mesquite trees in the Arizona desert, but well, there you go. Anyway, except they're not looking as gnarly as mesquite, and I'm wobbling on. I just really ought to shut up. I don't know a lot about trees, so there we go. So I think we'll leave that there, but I like the tiger, but I want to just sort of push the majority of the scene back a little bit, and the quickest way to do that is to go and get a radial graduated filter. I'm going to shrink the image down just a little bit so I can see what I'm doing, because I'm actually going to take this filter off the side of the image, rather like that, and then I think we're just going to turn the exposure down just a little bit, not much, half a stop, and then I might take some clarity out, and I might put some negative dehaze on there as well, and I'm thinking that looks a little bit better. Might desaturate it just a tiny tad, and we'll go ahead and click done on that, and yeah, I'm quite liking that. Oh, you are, Steve. Yeah, you might not. Takes all sorts to make the world go round, and I think all I'm going to do is just bob this over into Photoshop. This computer does like taking its time, and there we go. And I'm just going to blow the image up to 100%, hold the spacebar key down, and we will just go and get the spot healing brush, and we will shrink it down, and we will just come in there like that, and that sort of got rid of that, and I might just come in there and have a quick scribble on there. That's got rid of that, take it back to a fit to screen view, and yeah, might just come and take that dark bit out there, and go and pick up the spot healing brush again, and just paint across there, and across there. Yeah, I think that'll just about do. Is there anything else? No, that's all looking relatively fine. We'll go File, we'll go Save, and with a little bit of luck and what is it, a fair wind, here we go, back inside Lightroom again, and yeah, that would look absolutely gorgeous printed out. Might it just benefit from a little bit of kitschness and just a little bit of post-crop vignetting. Yeah, I rather like that. Let's fill the screen with it. Yeah, I like that. Oh, you do, Steve. So there we go. Oh, that's answered your question, Steve, about the possibilities with partial metering. I don't know, mate. I suspect it might have been slightly beneficial, but perhaps not by much more than a stop. But I'll just give you a bit of advice. Just watch those super high ISOs. Just maybe use a little bit less exposure comp, and just remember your camera's ISO invariant, so you can always lift the image up in post inside the likes of Lightroom without really suffering any noise penalty because of ISO invariance. So there we go. I hope this has recorded all the audio. I hope the GoPro's recorded all the video. Yes, I do. Anyway, okay, that'll be my last video till after Boxing Day. So, yeah, have a good one, guys. Stay safe, stay well, and I'll see you on the other side. Yes, ta-da.